Hello everyone! For today's topic, we are going to talk about the relationship between language and culture. To get it deeper in the conversation, we are with Arlena, Brian, and Natacha. So guys, what do you understand by language and culture? Arlena, do you want to start?
To me, languages is a system of signs that allows us to communicate, express ideas and emotions. It's not only grammar and vocabulary, but also a reflection of how we think and relate to each other.
Thanks, Arlena. Brian, do you want to add something about that information?
Yes, Oskana. I will say that language is also a window to culture. Through it, we can understand the traditions, values, and ways of life of a community. For example, in some languages, there are words that do not exist in others, reflecting cultural differences.
Interesting. Natacha, how could you complement this idea?
I agree with Oskana and Arlena. In languages teaching, this is crucial. We not only teach grammar, but also how to use languages in a specific cultural context. Therefore, talking about languages is also talking about interculturality.
Nice! Now that we have a foundation, we can get it deeper in how language and culture influence each other. Arlena, can you give us an example of how culture influences language?
Let's start the case of languages with different levels of formality. Like Japanese, the use of formal or informal language depends on social hierarchy, which is deeply rooted in their culture. This shows how culture shapes language.
Thanks, Arlena. Brian, would you like to say something else?
Yes, and it also happens the other way around. Language can influence culture. As an example, in English, there are many words related to technology because it is a culture very oriented towards innovation that affects how they see the world.
I see. Natacha, how do you see this relationship between language and culture?
Totally. In languages teaching, we say how students sometimes struggle to understand cultural expressions. For example, proverbs. In Spanish, we say, más vale pájaro en mano que cien volando, which reflects a practical mindset. But in other cultures, that concept does not exist.
That's correct. So, now let's talk about culture stereotypes. Brian, how do you think this affects communication?
Stereotypes can be an obstacle. To give an example, thinking that all Germans are cold or that all Latin Americans are extroverted. That limits the real understanding of culture and can lead to misunderstandings.
Thanks, Brian. Arlena, anything else to add?
Yes, and language can perpetuate these stereotypes. That is why it's important to be aware of how we use words and describe other cultures.
Natacha, how do you address this issue in language teaching?
In teaching, we try to break those stereotypes. For example, showing the diversity within a culture. Not all Spanish love flamenco, nor do all Japanese practice martial arts.
Excellent. Now, let's talk about interculturality. Natacha, how do you think we can promote it?
Interculturality is promoted by exposing students to different cultural perspectives. For example, using authentic materials like film, music, or news from other countries. It is also important to openly discuss cultural difference and how they affect communication.
Thank you, Natasha. Brian, do you want to add something?
I agree. Besides, I think it is crucial to foster empathy, understanding that there is no better culture, but that each has its own value.
Arlena, how will you complement this idea?
It is also important to teach students to be critical of the information they receive about other cultures. Not everything said in the media or internet is true or represents an entire community.
It was great, guys. Okay, now let's move on and talk about the importance of culture in language teaching. What do we think about? Elena, what do you think is important to include culture in language teaching?
Because language does not exist in a vacuum, it is deeply connected to culture. If we only teach grammar and vocabulary, students will not be prepared to communicate effectively in real life.
Thank you, Arlena. Brian, do you want to add something?
Exactly. Also, learning about other cultures helps students be more open and tolerant in a globalized world. That is essential.
Natasha, how would you complement that?
And not only that, culture also makes learning more interesting and meaningful. Learning about their traditions, food, music, or festivities of another country can motivate a student a lot of.
Well, we talk about how culture and language intertwine stereotypes. To close, I would like to ask you guys, what final message would you like to leave to our audience?
That languages is more than words, it's a tool to understand the world and others. Learning a language is also learning to see things from another perspective.
And that culture is not static, it is constantly changing, and language is a fundamental part of that evolution. We must be curious and respectful of cultural differences.
Finally, that interculturality is an essential skill in a globalized world. Learning a language is also learning to coexist with people from other cultures.
Thank you all for your contribution. Hope this discussion was so enriching for you as it was for me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.